everyone, and welcome to Coffee and Chats. My name is Lindsay Giese, and I'm the Executive Director for River Arts, Inc. Today's chat is brought to you by John Joseph Coffee. And our special guest today is Austin Bear. Hi!
Hello!
If you watched last week's episode, you knew this was coming. And you also would know that Austin is Teresa's son, and Teresa was our guest last week. So we're very excited. We've never done a family edition before, so you're the first.
This is new.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Austin, I do like to talk a little bit about the guest background, kind of where they grew up, just a little bit about what you're doing now before we dig into some of the fun stuff. So could you please share a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I actually wasn't born in Sauk Prairie. I was born in like the Baraboo area and spent a few of my early years in Baraboo, probably up to like about first grade. A lot of that stuff is really not memorable to me. But then after that, I was grandfathered into like the school program here in Sauk, and then spent all of my grade school, middle school, high school years in Sauk. So then I went to school, did a lot of the music program stuff, really, really involved in like band and show choir, everything that I could be. And then I graduated from Sauk in 2014 and attended UW Milwaukee from 2014 to 2019 when I graduated this past December.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And then I continued to pursue music through my college education. So yeah, now I'm fully graduated and out in the world for what it is. So
yes, I love that. I think this might be one of my favorite chats because you're like a crazy music person like me. So
yeah,
there should be more of us in the world.
I know.
We speak a different language, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know you were in band. What instrument did you play, or do you play?
So I played tuba in the band for like concert and stuff like that, and then I marched tuba for marching band.
Whoa!
But heavy instruments. Would not recommend if you're not up for it. But
I feel like I would choose like the piccolo. Can I play piccolo in marching band?
Oh yeah, well certainly. It's a little weird because it's a really shrill instrument, but it's easy.
It's appropriate.
So,
yep.
Yeah.
My choice.
But so then I played tuba for that, and then I would play bass guitar for like show band and for jazz band, which I think is actually still. I think the jazz band is still going on with Mr. K. I mean, I haven't talked to them in such a long time, but yeah.
That's wonderful. Do you still play?
I play a little bit of bass guitar here and there. I mean, going through college, I had to dedicate so much of my time to voice that like really didn't really have an outlet for bass at all.
Right.
And then tuba is just like so expensive that I couldn't purchase my own. I couldn't time. It's just, I ran out of it when I was practicing for like voice and joining vocal ensembles and stuff like that. It kind of becomes very, very rigid going through that program. Like you have to do this, you have to do voice, and that's it. And it's very hard to branch out from that. So
yeah, how has the transition from like show choir and like music theater kind of world into the opera world been?
It was quite intense, like going straight from high school into college and seeing the difference and kind of having that path laid out in front of me was very different from the freedom that I had from just being able to like pick and choose what music thing I could do. But then like in college, it was like, you have this repertoire. What are you doing? Are you going to be a BA in vocal performance? Are you going to strictly do opera? Or are you going to try to do musical? And in the beginning of my college career, they had them very separated. There was no cross degree. It was just, you're either doing classical or you're doing contemporary, and that's it. Now, since I graduated, they actually included a degree for CCM, and you could actually mix the two fields into one, which I wish was a thing when I was going through it. But I mean, the new generation has that freedom So
Yeah, I feel like that's tricky because most opera singers, though, that I've talked to, it's such a different technique, and once you go there with your voice, it's really hard then to go back to at least like the more, not the crossover musicals necessarily, but some of the more poppy ones.
yes, yes.
And I know that there are a lot of strong opinions about it, like no, you can't do both, and
Hmm.
or you
It's
can't
all
properly. Or,
yes. I mean, it's almost like well, my friends and I would talk about it a lot, because it's almost like it's a little bit of an elitist opinion that it's like if you are dedicating yourself to opera, you cannot take part in the others, um, which is like it's a little degrading when you hear that when you're like dedicating so much time. But I mean, like if you're very into it, then it really doesn't affect you. I try to still include CCM rep in like my list of repertoire because I think it's important like to be well versed in all forms.
yeah,
And it's fun to sing because like I mean some of the opera stuff is so depressing because it's just like it's death or
very
like
heavy. It's very heavy.
it's very heavy, and sometimes singing a little bit of something else is a lot of fun, and it brings out that little bit of like character stuff.
Yeah,
And I mean going through like history and stuff like that, it was very eye-opening to see that opera and musical theater is becoming closer and closer together. Like it's very blurred lines nowadays between the two, and like operetta being in between, solely in between those, it's becoming such a mash of musical forms. And I think it's really cool to see that, to see like avant-garde style of staging for a classic opera, or a very like conservative staging for a fan favorite musical. So it's I don't know, it's very
why
interesting.
not? Why not? Let's
Great,
keep
right.
it. I when I was in college, I studied music theater, but I also did my college show choir.
Hmm.
I got a lot of flack for that because I had a lot of like my acting professors would say that show choir was going to damage my acting skills because it wasn't real acting. It was like all this fluff. But and I wasn't the only one. Like I did cruise ships, which are basically I think of glorified show choirs. So I went on to have like a career, and I know that other people did too, in like singing and dancing, and so the people were able to find work by being versatile. And now they support it. But when I was in it, it was like, nope, you can't do both. This is going to ruin your education. Like, really? So I'm
And
not a
it's
fan of the purist concept either.
no, because it can be very degrading, especially for like an incoming person, like an incoming student of the art. It's very like it can take away from your passion for it a lot.
And that divides people when the arts typically bring people together, right? It divides, like, here's the opera,
Right.
here's the music theater, which I think is a really good segue to get into the meat of our conversation today, which is about division of people.
Yes.
And so I have a lot of questions for you, but I want to kind of go back to I have questions about racism in general, in the music industry and in opera, because
Mhm.
I'm interested in that perspective. But I'm here in Sauk Prairie, and I love Sauk Prairie, and it sounds like you had a good experience here as well. But I think because we have such little diversity, and I talked to your mom about this a little bit too, that people might think with little diversity means we have little racism happening.
Mhm.
I don't think that's the case, and I think we need to share stories. And if not, maybe I hope that you had a great experience. Your mom told me about a few things already that were
Mhm.
heartbreaking. But I guess I would just love to hear more about your experience growing up in Sauk Prairie and your perspective.
Sure. Really, from a lot of my younger years, there isn't a lot to say. Um, all the way through like grade school and middle school, it was pretty uneventful until that time when my mom had told that story of the kid that had that had used the N word on me every single day, basically.
And
That
that
was
was
very,
middle school.
yeah.
Mhm.
So, and that was like a time when middle school is hard for everybody. Like it's a very stressful time. Things are happening, like it's bad. And just to add that on top of it, and I had no idea what to do. Like, I was just born this way. Like, I can't change who I am in the core. So that was a whole thing, which I'm glad was resolved in the end. But and then going on into high school, Miss Lure and Miss Holloway were very, very inspirational for me. Because I mean, my mom and my aunt and my uncle all went through that program. And then I went through that program next, and they never treated me in a way that was like I am different. They never saw me as that. I was another student to them, which was very, at the time, I didn't know how powerful that was. But like now in hindsight, as I've grown older, I have had time to think back on these events and like how people treated me, and like figuring out what if, like, okay, someone said something to me in the past that wasn't okay to say, or that wasn't okay to do. Like, why would you do that? But yeah, other than the stories that my mom had told this past week, there wasn't really much other than that was on the severe end. I mean, not until, yeah, pretty much the whole time that I was in SOC, I don't think anything really.
Well, that's
really
encouraging to
bad.
hear. I'm really glad that that was your experience. Then your mom did kind of say, she's like,
And I mean, it's what?
we both froze for a second.
Oh.
The nature of virtual chatting. You know, your mom said there might be some differences between being like a male or female, or you just you found a home that was with around really supportive people. You surrounded yourself with really good people, and
Yes.
that's one thing I love about the arts too, because that typically is a safe place for most people, not always. So I'm glad that you found that. Did you? So SOC actually sounds like it was pretty good experience. In college, college is in Milwaukee, big city. Were there any differences there, or?
Yes. I mean, just like coming here for orientation, just for the orientation for my freshman year was culture shock, really. Like going through the communities of disparity. Like simply crossing the bridge and going into a different neighborhood it's almost degrading to see. Like I live in Shorewood currently, pretty close to campus actually, and just down the street, like if I was to go like a few blocks to the west into like the Capitol neighborhood and inner city area, just like seeing that it's really disappointing, to be honest. Like it's really sad to see that these people of color specifically have had to live a life of just like an awful nature, like run down buildings, police officers that just use their power to threaten them, just these terrible living positions. And then going to UWM as like one of the most diverse schools, I'd say probably in the state, if not in the Midwest, was very, very interesting for me, because coming from SOC, there was like maybe a few people of color that went through in my grade. And then going to UWM, even in the music program, there weren't a lot of people of color. It was mostly white people that went through the music program. And, you know, thinking back on it, a lot of it probably had to do with the fact that like the people who live in the people of color who live in the inner cities never had the opportunity to progress in that art form, because it's too expensive, or it's too far away, or it like, there's just a lot of things that burden a person of color from progressing into a field. I think it's getting better per se, but it could never be at the point that people that have an advantage or have opportunity or any of those things could reap the benefits from. So it was very different, and I've kind of grown into it now, being here for so long. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the opera world, is it as typecast of a thing as music theater where your looks play a major role in getting parts, or because it isn't traditionally, you're right, I would say it is a white dominated field.
Hmm.
um but are the characters pretty, that race is not a factor in getting cast in opera, or
I think it is. It really kind of depends on who the company is, or like who the people running the show are. I mean, I did a show with Milwaukee Opera Theater, who I absolutely adore. Like, they are a great group of people. They're very inclusive. Um, they don't disrespect anyone for their background or for who they are or their race or anything. You're an artist, you want to be in a show, audition, and you can be in a show. Like, you will get whatever you. They're just great. But then there could be like the other side of the bridge where it's like, you don't fit the bill for this character. Like, you aren't like a strapping white person to fit this role, to fit this box.
yeah.
Then you're a chorus member, like, or you're not even in the show.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it really does depend on who's the one hiring and who's the one doing the staging. It's very personal when it comes to things like that.
So the music theater world it's very much about typecasting for, and if you don't know what typecasting means, that it's very much about your looks. So you think about I don't know, what's probably a common musical that everybody knows, Oklahoma.
Yes.
Lori is probably like a petite, pretty white woman.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like stuff like that, where it's like not even necessarily, there are race divisions, so there are certain roles that are for people of color.
Yeah.
But then within the race, there are like physical features that they look for a role. So
Mm-hmm.
when you're not in the industry, that can be like, whoa, like that
Yes.
seems really harsh. When you're in it, I think you do kind of figure like, okay, this isn't something, or at least my experience is that you don't take it personally, because like they want to cast it this way and be very stick to the original.
Yeah, definitely.
Casting. Do you feel that way as well when you see like stuff get typecast in music theater, that it's not so much like, or is it offensive?
I think it kind of goes both ways, to be honest. Like, I think it goes back to the whole, like, it really depends on if the company wants to do something to the books, or if they want to be forward or progressive in their staging and casting.
Yeah.
Because I think it's definitely relevant.
And represent people today.
Yes.
Which is what a lot of older shows, they were, I guess, representing what the culture was like at the time, but things change over decades, which is great. And so musicals should be, in arts in general, should be representing everybody.
Yeah. Well, and then it goes into like, there's a Mozart opera that features a Moor, which in that time was a black person. And sometimes companies will just completely cut that role because it's offensive at the time.
Oh.
And like, when you go back and research it, you realize that it's like, oh, that's actually not okay. Like, what was being portrayed as being like a stereotypical, stingy, like, very bad portrayal of a black man, was not okay to produce. But then you also take it to the other side, where it's like, this is important to show that this was a problem, and this is still a problem nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
So there's like complete polars and everything in between when it comes to things like that.
Well, that kind of brings up, I got to thinking about this. We were in the 25th annual Putnam County Spelling Bee together several years ago now. So it was such a pleasure to work with you.
It was amazing. It was really fun.
Yeah, it's such a fun show. But I got to thinking, you played a character, and And in general, I would say like there are a lot of shows where stereotypes of people are heightened.
Mm,
So you might have a very flamboyant gay person or a
yes.
really ditzy blonde or but in your case this character was like always cast as a black person and the character is supposed to be sort of like a thug,
Hmm.
which if that's the like if thug is what the heightened stereotype of a black person is, I just got to thinking, I'm like, when you have to play characters like that, like is that like do you just go there because it's a character and you're like, okay, I can do this because I'm playing a character, but like does that get sort of offensive or does that get old that it's like why is this, or
You
did it
know,
at the time did it not even phase
uh,
you?
to be honest, at the time, I didn't put much thought into it. It was like, oh, this is a role. I'm in my hometown. Like, this is gonna be a lot of fun. I'm working with the people that I like went to school with and that I worked with in the past. Like, great. This is awesome. But as you're saying, like it's very like cookie cutter.
Yeah.
To put someone like me or another person of color in a role like that, that's very thug like or very like I don't know. Like it just seems when I was doing little things on it, it seemed like he was a person who had served time or something like that.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
which
But why was it that character? Why does that character have to be black? That is the one that's
right.
criminal.
And
That
why was it me that played that character? Why wasn't I anyone else? But
well, and that's another, a whole other question that I had was, you have a unique perspective growing up in a town with little diversity, but when you're talking about the arts, it doesn't. How does that feel to know you're probably going to get cast because there's not a lot of diversity? If there's a character of color that's automatically the character you're going to be. Like, is that frustrating?
mhm.
Was it like? Did it feel like you got rid of some competition and you're like, yes, I got this?
um, I think in a funny way, it would be kind of like getting rid of competition, where it's like only I can play this role. So like no one else can play this role, and if they try to make someone else play this role, it's like you probably shouldn't do that. It'd be a little offensive if you tried to do that.
Yep.
But yeah, no, in the theater world, it definitely pains me a little bit that it's like I can't I can't do something else because of the way I am or because of what I look like. I
Yeah.
have to be this character. I have to learn these roles because that's all I'm going to be hired for.
Okay, so we had another technical difficulty. We did a scene change. We're back. Austin's outside. It's a lovely day. Why not?
Mhm.
Now, I know you have been involved in some of the protesting in Milwaukee.
Yeah.
Could you, or do you feel comfortable sharing some of those experiences and why you feel like it's important to do what you're doing? And yeah.
Oh, sure. So yeah, I've been in a few of the Milwaukee marches over the past couple weeks, and it was very enlightening for me, especially uh, coming from a background in a town that didn't have something like this, didn't have like an outlet for something like this. I'd have to go to Madison as the closest place. Um, but being able to put my voice out there and share the stories that these people never had the chance to share, raising awareness and raising my voice and the voices of other people of color for a cause that is just and peaceful. um, I felt like it was my duty to do that. Like, it, I don't know what else I would do if I wasn't. Um, and I actually had seen a post about it, kind of a comment about it, and one of the lines from it is, "I am marching today so that my children do not have to march tomorrow." And I think that stuck with me really. Um, I mean, it's weird of me to say this, but even as a person of color, I did have privilege. I had privilege growing up. Um, it's just simply being a single child or an only child, that was a lot of privilege. Growing up in a white community, that was a lot of privilege. Having the education that I have now is a lot of privilege. And I think it's important that I speak and I have discussions. I don't want to fight with people. I just want to educate. And these protests is an outlet for that, I think. I mean, I definitely do not condone any of the violence or any of the bad things that happen to it. But you also have to take into consideration that we as the Black community have been marching and protesting for years, for hundreds of years. And nothing has changed. Like, there's been changes to certain things, but it's really just painting over the other bad things very lightly. Like, they still come through. And we've been trying to be peaceful. And sometimes when peace isn't making anything happen, it turns violent. We don't want it to be. I don't want it to be. But sometimes that's what happens.
Right. Well, unfortunately, to get the attention to the issue that it needs, right, that sometimes is the only way that it's happened. And historically, that is how it's been. Like, any kind of small progression forward or a movement, there's been peaceful and non-peaceful rioting or protesting.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I mean, like, I haven't been a part of any of the violent riots and looting and stuff like that, because that doesn't fall into what I believe would make the change. But yeah, I think that it's important to go out and support these people, to support my people. Even my I would consider them allies, my roommates, my white friends. Just simply having them be there for me and talk and correct people when they make these mistakes. I think it's very important to use that power of privilege to educate. So,
well, and it's interesting that you say that you have come from some privilege, and that you feel like it's sort of a duty to use that privilege to make a difference. And I think for people of any color who are watching that have, right, that's an interesting perspective, because most people are saying, like, white people should use their privilege, but privilege, no matter what kind of privilege you have, if you have it,
right,
use it, because really we all need to do our part to make this happen.
Right. And it goes for the future too. Like, these small steps that we take today impact the future in a great way. It'll improve everyone if we make the changes now.
Is there anything else that you feel like we didn't talk about? Anything else you'd like to share? Advice on what we can do here in Sauk Prairie to make a difference?
Really, just see what's happening around in the world. Sauk is a very quiet and nice community, and it's just very to be able to go home and shut the blinds and just close yourself away, and there isn't any violence or there isn't any sirens going around at night. But that isn't the entire world. Just realize that Sauk is a small part of it, and there are other communities around it that are suffering from this, and just look it up, educate yourself. I'm educating myself still too. Like, I have a long way to go still, and I don't think anyone will be able to say that they have fully learned everything that's going on. So yeah, I think any support is good support, and just sharing the message, sharing that love, even if it's just a simple, like, talking to a friend or posting on Facebook or Instagram, like, it goes a long way.
Well, thank you. It's inspiring to see what you as a young person, what you're doing, and is hopeful for like you said, you're trying to make change for future generations, and so
Mhm.
you once were that future generation for somebody else, and so I think it's really powerful to think about it that way too. So so thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for chatting with me. Thank you for watching and listening, and we hope to see you next week at our next coffee chat. Bye.
Bye.